We'd hear from Pilar. Pilar, would you be willing to go first? Great, thank you.
Okay, so we had a really good discussion in my room. I think I'm going to do a terrible job capturing all of it. I'm going to try my best because there's a lot of things I don't know much about. So if I misspeak, feel free to correct me. But we did have a few people in our room who are, you know, either retired military. So one of our participants mentioned that, you know, they'd been in a military family for 13 years until a retirement. But as soon as they saw the things that were happening in Afghanistan, they were sort of called to help again, even though wasn't really an active duty military personnel anymore. And this person mentioned that she's very moved to see how many active duty and former active duty military have really stepped up to help the cause and help people in Afghanistan. And she said, I think I wrote a quote down. I thought it was really kind of a beautiful way to say it, is that even though you may not still be, you know, in active duty military, a lot of people in the military are responding to a call that is a promise that lies deep within them. And so it's sort of always with you to kind of serve and be of service. And I thought that was really, really powerful. And then we were really fortunate to have someone who's been very much involved with the efforts himself. And he was saying that he had gotten an opportunity to start working through Nalini and has kind of been along for the ride with everything that's been going on with the efforts that we heard about a little bit about earlier in our opening speakers. And he was saying, if you would go, part of it is how do you influence others to want to help or to want to make a difference? And if you were to go up to people on the street and say, hey, do you want to help people in Afghanistan? They would say yes. But it's how do you sort of make that bridge for the people who want to help and how to get them to be able to help. We talked a little bit about how it's an overwhelming situation to think about for a lot of people. And I mentioned how I think we've had a few previous discussions where we weren't sure where the, you know, organizations that are really going to help and really be effective. It's a matter of wanting your resources and your help to go to organizations that are really going to make a big impact. And how do you sort of know which are the best ways to make an impact? He said, though, that he has some daughters who are college age, and he found that sort of trying to plant seeds in his daughters and people their age, he thinks is a way to sort of get people to step up, because there's so many opportunities for activism on college campuses. And so people who are in college are kind of a good population to sort of reach out to. And we had one of our speakers' parents in our room, and it was lovely to have them. And they said that they've been, you know, praying for their son for a long time because of all the service that he's done, not just as an active duty service person, but all of the work he's been doing to help the Afghan people, and that they have a large amount of compassion, but also mentioned they have found it harder to find ways to help and make a difference, even though they have such a close connection with their son doing this amazing work. So I think that was a theme we sort of came up with throughout our talk. And we also talked a little bit about what are really the barriers to getting people who want to leave out of Afghanistan. And we talked a little bit about, are there planes that are leaving? And we think we ended up thinking that it seems like the most of the barriers are paperwork, having the right paperwork to be able to get you and all of your family members out of Afghanistan. And not only that, finding a safe place to go or land temporarily while you can get processed before you can get placed in sort of a more permanent situation. I learned the term lily pad as sort of a landing place for people who are temporarily in a safe place until they can go somewhere more permanent. And we just sort of talked about how like the administrative part has really been an issue. It's not necessarily that people getting out of place. It's you don't have the right paperwork to be processed or to, you know, and even if you just walked over the border to Pakistan, if you don't have the right documentation, you might just be sent right back to where you came from. So I feel like we talked about a whole lot of other stuff. We talked a little bit about COVID and that being sort of like a sort of a overarching difficulty that you can't even really think too much about because you have more pressing matters of life and death at hand. But at least that we learned that the US have been able to provide many vaccinations, not just for COVID, but for other vaccinations. And so that was interesting. I didn't know that. But we spoke a little bit about wondering if one of our members had a question, if anyone has a sense of how many people or what percentage of the population really is in support of the new government and how many people don't really want to leave. Well, we talked about how it's hard to find those numbers out because some people may be staying because they feel that they have fear and then they can't leave, or they may be able to leave because they have paperwork, but their family members may not, and they don't want to leave their family members behind. And so we kind of talked about how it's hard to quantify and understand really who is there, who in Afghanistan is supporting the new government and who really wants to get out. And that's also kind of a challenge in and of itself. So we talked about a lot of other stuff. I'll be honest with you, Liam was really a wealth of information. And I have like 26 pages of notes. I'm not going to read all of them, but I think those are the major themes. And I look forward to hearing from the other groups and I thank my group for their wonderful participation.
Thank you so much, Pilar. And I really, really appreciate how you presented some of the things that as civilians and as people who are a few steps away, we just may not know about. So thank you for sharing. It's helpful for all of us. We would like to hear from Dr. Clifton next. So Dr. Clifton, if you would go, we'll give you the button to unmute.
Okay. We had our group had the pleasure of the general with us. We initially pursued how it was for him to be living here now, and he was very open and shared his feelings of adaptability, his experience that he had been here. He could grasp the culture. He shared the separation from his family who were in India, and it was like a personal, soulful connection, and he was telling about his life. And then we kind of moved to one of our members talked that ways that we could. He had networks that he could maybe connect people in various countries that have left and are separated from their family in the United States. So we could, and then that moved to a question of the demographics of the people that are here in America and how we could help them. And and the general pointed out very clearly in a great leadership way that he could see developing task force related to the different demographics with different goals, and they could, and one, like Pilar's group mentioned, one of the biggest goal is the task force is to somehow get through the bureaucracy and the paperwork that is kind of overwhelming and extremely frustrating. But that's one of the task force. Another task force for educational purposes. We recommended maybe a task force of dealing with, we're talking here about the people that have been that have gotten to the United States with mental health issues, not so much that there's something wrong with them, but they're just in a state of utter shock where suddenly the rug has been pulled out from economy, their hopes, and they're suddenly, in a new place. And some of them are sitting in bases, and we talked about maybe connecting them to people, Afghanis, who professional Afghanis. I know a group of, in New York area that are psychologists and social workers, and try to develop, um, networks that could help educate and refer people and show through their experience of developing themselves in America how this is really possible. And that was, the general's pointing out of task force, and the clarity was, really clear. There was a kind of, that you could see that underlying sense of leadership, and let's cut to this chase. Let's get this, or this, and this aspect going. And that was very uplifting. And then, one of the deepest questions was, how do you see, what hope do you see for the people that are still there in Afghanistan? And, and you sort of really shared that, well, we can't expect to get everybody out, but we can, we can rely on our history, rely on connections that we've had, and, have help the people that want to leave and that are going to get out, finding ways, financial ways to get out. And that brought onto a discussion of the relationship between, governmental help and private sector help, or volunteer help, and how to coordinate that, and is, and that's lacking, and it's very challenging, and you have a lot of people that really may like to help more, but they have to enhance the communication, which is probably the age-old story in all government and non-government. So, but we left with a sense of awe of the magnitude of the difficulties, but also an underpinning of hope and sort of action plans that, that if we can get coordinated and get a number of groups together, that, well, there's more possibilities than when we look at the difficulties. So it was enlightening, and hopefully we can take some actions and develop our own networks with these issues. So thank you. It was a great experience.
Thank you, Dr. Clifton. Many thanks to hearing, to be able to have the chance to hear more about General Alizai. So thank you, Dr. Clifton, for summarizing that and sharing that back with everyone. We'll next hear from Joe Albano. Joe, if you could unmute.
Yes, I am unmuted, I hope.
Yes.
I'd like to pull on a different thread of the tapestry that our other two facilitators have already woven. And one of the things that became just really clear from the beginning of our conversation in our small group, and we had Matt in our group, so we had the advantage of that perspective as well, is how disruptive this is to individual lives. And we talked about this a little bit. We talked about it a little bit in the opening perspectives. Dr. Clifton added to this a little bit. But this idea that you are in a stable family, in a stable profession, having a level of accomplishment in your life, and suddenly all of that is removed and replaced by nothing but uncertainty for you, for your family. I don't think any of us can really imagine how completely disruptive that is. So as we started to look at that, we started first to explore the problem a little bit more. And so I think it's very easy to get seduced by the solution is to get people out of that situation. But getting out of the country is just the beginning of a journey. And we've heard a lot about that journey tonight, about people who are finding themselves in situations where they suddenly have to just figure out how they're going to support themselves on a day-to-day basis, how they're going to afford a place to eat, a place to stay, a way to eat, a way to feed their families, and so a way that they're going to reattach to some next stable income producing, family sustaining life. And that's not just removing themselves from a country. And we've heard a lot about the challenges of that with paperwork and policy and all that sort of thing. But it's almost like figuring out how to live again, because all of the rules are different and all of the support systems have nearly instantaneously gone away. So as part of that conversation, policy came up, and we had what I imagine are very similar to other people's conversations about documents and, you know, the ridiculousness of some of the policies that the fact that you don't have an original document with a raised seal and an ink signature is not offset by a long-term personal relationship with people in the military who have high levels of security and can vouch for you personally. And certainly there's a lot that needs to be done at the policy level. But one of the things that I learned is that one of the most effective tools in terms of moving individual cases forward is to advocate on an individual case basis. So that when a government representative with some level of authority becomes aware of a case, simply by that person inquiring about the case can help move things forward. So I know it's cliche to say, write your congressperson, but write your congressperson. I mean, you know, as you get involved in these things, and not just at a broad policy level, but if you do decide to become more involved and to get to know individuals, advocating at the individual level is a tool that I'm learning is far more effective than I ever thought. So I think that that's important enough that that's where I'd like to leave it.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was really a different perspective and an important perspective. So thank you for sharing that. We'll now hear a few words from Matt Cheney. So Matt, if we could turn it back to you as Pilar shares a slide, that would be great.
All right, we'll wait for the slide to come up. So just as listening to a lot of people's comments and questions, I think one of the challenges here is how big the problem is. And we naturally like to be able to define the problem, envision an end state, and then create, you know, our 5-phase plan to get us to that end state. And this situation is not easily definable, and the magnitude of it is so great such that that can be crippling to taking action. And what I would challenge everybody on here to do is that just take one step forward. You can, as an individual, make a difference. And so we got some steps in here of things that we can do to just take one step. You don't have to know how to get to the end. You just have to take a step forward and do something about it. And so we've, this collective large group of individuals and volunteers have come together and formed some really impactful networks that are getting things done. And at every level, what I've kind of learned through this whole process and really just been in awe of is that one person can make a difference, and if they're willing to do something. And so we've been able to create these very informal networks with a very low bureaucracy, almost no chain of command type concept, but individuals taking action and making a difference. And it really has been, as you know, I've tried to support the families that are on my list. It has just been sort of day by day, those little bits of money that comes in that allows me to spread that, give it to the greatest need. out there that, you know, really moving people between safe houses and shelters on the day they needed it. They got kicked out of this house and now something comes up, and it's from another individual stepping up, another relationship built that allows somebody to have shelter or food or heat that night. So it's been a very special experience to be a part of. It is overwhelming. If you take that step, it will grab a hold of you and probably grab a hold of your heart a bit, but you can make it absolutely different. It's super cool to see that and to get the pictures of the family and to be able to like see General Al's go meet him at Quantico. Special experience. I'm gonna try to see him Wednesday night before Thanksgiving here on the East Coast. But the next step will be getting his family here, right? These are all real, very, very real and close and personal things that we need help with. We need people to take action. And so here on the list, right, obviously resources are the biggest thing that the immediate need. The network is there to support people. We need money to help those people out. I've kind of given some rules of thumb to our smaller group, right? It takes about somewhere anywhere between about $200 and $400 to support a family per month, but that's food and shelter, the very, very most basic needs. But $50 will feed a family for a couple weeks. We need people advocating for policy change. We talked a bit about that on even down to what kind of documents are required to get somebody out of the country and into another country. We need policy engagement, not just within the US, but in other countries. We need the lily pads that were referenced. So there can be efforts across the whole gamut to writing your congressman on an individual case. So some of our greatest needs, we say, reach out to a Congress person and ask them to accelerate a case because this person's under greatest threat at that time. That's been effective. And then you can volunteer. It takes a lot of individual hours and efforts to manage the data, to communicate with our people, to ensure they have the resources they need to manage their visa applications and other document requirements. So lots of effort there. Hopefully the money comes together and we need volunteer pilots to fly people out, right? So there's some big ticket items. Lots of people want to be a part of buying the flight, but we also need people to be a part of just feeding the kids or enough money to get a coat. So I will stop there. I think that covers it. Nelly, if I missed something, please jump in. Thanks.
Matt, you're completely comprehensive. Thank you so much for offering that. Really appreciate it. Please take a look at your screen. Feel free to grab a screenshot of this. We've pasted these details into the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Operation North Star. I am happy to put my own contact details here if anyone would like to contact me. And if any of the other people here who are involved would like to share their emails, I invite you to do the same. This has been it's a serious topic, and it's really heart-wrenching for so many of us who are seeing what's happening and hearing what's happening on a daily basis. So it's tough for us as this touches our hearts and hurts our hearts a lot. So we thank you for listening and for participating.